Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. I am Doria Reeser and work as a marketing communications specialist at ACDLabs. And in particular, I support all MetaSense communications. Please note that we are recording this webinar so you can watch it and share it afterwards. It is with great pleasure that I introduce today's speaker, Dr. Richard Lee. Richard has a rich research history with strategies for metabolite identification and metabolomics studies. He's been working with ACDLabs for 4 years and is the solutions manager for metabolite identification and characterization. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us today to talk about how you can move from your tedious MetID reporting to a streamlined process.
Thank you, Doria, for that introduction. So as Doria has mentioned, today we'll be talking about how the MetaSense MetID solution can streamline your reporting practices. And I'll touch upon how it can go from your conventional paper report to the web. Just as a quick overview, I'll be talking about the MetaSense workflow. I'll touch upon that and give you a brief recap of it. In our previous webinar, we went into a bit more detail about it. So if you want to have some more information about the MetaSense workflow, you can revisit that webinar. I believe that recording is still available. Then I'll be moving on to some of the typical reporting practices and their current limitations. And then move on to how reporting and sharing of that information is done within the MetaSense solution. We can generate a direct report, so again, a very traditional report, or you can present the results through Spectrus Processor, which is our basic data processing software, or you can use MetaSense on the web, which is leveraging the Spectrus portal technology. And again, this is a way to share the results through the organization. I'll touch upon some of the IT architecture that's going to be required for some of these deployments and finish off with a demo of Spectrus portal. So just as a quick recap, the MetaSense workflow really does start from the left on your screen. So where we have our data input, so the data will be your LCMS data and a structure file. The structure file goes into our prediction engine and it predicts an exhaustive list of possible metabolite structures. The data and this list goes into our metabolite prediction engine, or sorry, our metabolite detection and identification engine, where we first use the accurate mass and theoretical isotope patterns to detect potential metabolites. Then we extract out the MS2 spectra and compare the spectra between the parent and metabolite, as well as incorporating some physiochemical property prediction to elucidate a discrete structure. Once the data is processed, all the results gets uploaded to Spectrus DB. That is our databasing platform. So once the data is processed, a biotransformation map gets automatically generated, as well as all of your analytical data, your mass spectra and your chromatograms gets attached to each of these structures within the biotrans map. At this point, you can manually review and curate the results. It's here that you can also generate the report, whether it's a paper report, viewing the data or the results through a web portal or through the Spectrus Processor interface. In terms of traditional reporting, it typically comes down to a paper report. Again, this is the bread and butter of all MetID groups or DMPK groups. You generate a final report, whether it's in a Word document, a PDF, it may be a PowerPoint file, or simply just an Excel file. Some of the elements within a conventional report, obviously you have your metadata that has your project information, summary text, might be analyst information. You have a summary table that lists all the metabolites that are found. It has your retention time, It has the names, it has peak areas as well. And also you may have a biotransformation map. And this biotransformation map is manually drawn, so you're drawing all your structures and arrows for this map, as well as you're piecing together a lot of the analytical data. So you have your mass spectra and chromatograms. So these are just the bones of a report from a MetID study. But typically it takes a significant amount of time. So all the information is manually curated, and it does become fairly tedious. And the report generation often takes as much time to prepare as compared to the data interpretation. Again, when the report is finally generated, it gets passed around to your customers or your project groups. The report gets viewed and it gets filed away. So again, it's not really accessible, so it's difficult to retrieve. It may get filed away into a directory or a project folder on some computer where, again, it's not fairly easily to retrieve. And maybe a few people may have access to this information or know its whereabouts. As I mentioned before, it only sometimes gets viewed once. Last but not least, this information may not get leveraged for future use. So again, if you're a synthetic or a medicinal chemist, they may not be able to view this information in the future, whereas they may use this information to direct their synthesis for future studies. So again, it's not really leveraged. Reporting through MetaSense, we try to address all these bottlenecks. So again, the first one is your conventional traditional report. So again, we have all the elements. So within the data processing of MetaSense, we have all the information such as the biotransformation map that gets automatically generated, the spectra, MS1, 2, and possibly MS3 data gets stored and attached to each of the structures within the biotransformation map. A summary table of results is generated along with some metadata. So one screen form that you'll see as part of the results is something that you see here. Again, you have your biotransformation map, stability kinetic plot that's generated from a summary table, your chromatographic information. This is just another screen form where it has some of the spectral information. So because the way that the data is processed and how the results are displayed, you have the ability to quickly generate a report. So again, we can generate a report directly to a PDF document or a Word document, or if you wanted to just simply export the summary table to an Excel file, that's fully accessible as well. An example of a very basic report can be seen here, where we have some metadata. You have your biotransformation map. You have some summary text as well. You have your stability and kinetic plot, as well as your summary table and your chromatogram, along with obviously your analytical data, your extracted ion chromatograms, along with your MS1 and MS2 spectra, along with the structures. So this is a very basic report that can be generated from a single click of a button. So again, all of the information is curated for you, so there's no manual curation of copying and pasting the spectra to a Word document. All this information is already there because of the way that the data has been processed and the way, and more importantly, the way that the data is stored or the results are stored within Spectrus DB. The second way to share that information or share the results is through Spectrus Processor. As I mentioned, it is our entry-level data processing platform. And this is really for those who already have Spectrus Processor deployed in their organization. So we have a number of clients and customers who already have Spectrus Processor in their synthetic or medicinal chemistry groups. And it's an easy way for them to view the results of the MetaSense data processing. So again, it's really for sharing information through Spectrus Processor. As I mentioned, organization already has deployed Spectrus Processor data processing platform. Again, the Spectrus DB has all the results stored. You have your biotransformation map, spectral information, chromatographic information, summary table, and metadata. And the data that is the results that are generated within MetaSense, again, this is a screenshot that you've seen before, would be the exact same information that your synthetic groups or your medicinal chemistry groups or your any other part of the organization that wants to access this data or the results through Spectrus Processor, it would look exactly the same. In terms of the IT architecture that's going to be required for this, we have the Windows client for MetaSense, and that talks to the Spectrus Enterprise server, which sits on a Windows OS server. For an enterprise solution, you need an Oracle DB in the back end, and you need Spectrus Processor on the right-hand side that will communicate with Spectrus DB Enterprise server. So it's a very simple IT setup. One of the benefits is that you have the users will be able to access this information anytime they need to, but they will be limited to specified databases. So again, the MetID expert will have full control of what information is being accessed and by who. Again, is controlled by MetaSense. The end users cannot edit any of the results. So again, it's just purely to view the results from the data processing. One of the added benefits of using Spectrus Processor is that you can actually search. So again, the end user can search by metadata. So again, if there are any metadata fields that you want to search by, you can simply do that. You can do structure searches. Again, you can search by fragment, exact structure, or similar structure. As well as within Spectrus Processor, you can do spectral searching, which is nice. So again, this information is fully accessible. So what we call is that this data is not simply dead on a paper document. It's fully accessible and it can be leveraged for future use. The third way to really share the results is through our new web technology called Spectrus Portal. It's really for the dissemination of the results through the web. It's a presentation layer that we've developed, and again, it has some added benefit. So users, again, will be able to log in through the web, but the users will be limited to specified DBs that will be, again, controlled by the MetID expert and controlled by MetaSense. The data that you see within the web portal will be the same that's found within the results of the MetaSense database. Once again, end users cannot edit the results. Okay. So this is key. So again, it's purely for viewing the results and performing searches. You can search by metadata within the web, as well as structure, whether it's fragment search, an exact search, or a similar structure type of search. Within the Spectrus portal, we believe that it is a web-based MetID decision support system. So we've developed it so that it's based off of JavaScript plugins. So it's fairly nimble and light. So there is no Windows client with this, and it is web browser independent. So it is fairly easy to deploy. One of the screenshots that I'll show you is seen here, where again, this is just simply opened up in Google Chrome. You have the biotransformation map. You have some analytical data, whether it's spectra or chromatograms, some metadata, as well as some search fields. And again, I'll elaborate this in a bit more detail when we go into the live demo of the Spectrus portal. But again, what I wanted to mention is that the biotransformation map is not just an image. It is quite interactive. So as you select each of the structures, the corresponding analytical data will be displayed. This is just another screenshot of some other information that might be found within the results of MetaSense. So you have your stability and kinetic plot along with your summary table that can be sorted. In terms of the IT architecture that's going to be required for this type of deployment, I'm just going to emphasize the Spectrus DB Enterprise portion. So you have your Windows OS Spectrus DB Enterprise, and that speaks to our Linux server. or your Linux server. On the Linux server, you have Apache Tomcat and MongoDB that is required to translate the information between our SpectrusDB enterprise server to the web interface. But again, these are all fairly standard IT databases and software that your typical IT department will be quite familiar with. So it is fairly easy to deploy within your IT organization. So with that, I'm just going to go into a quick demo of Spectrus Portal. So this is Spectrus Portal, and it is loaded within Google Chrome. Now the server itself is actually sitting in Europe. So again, but for your organization, it will be on site somewhere, or perhaps on one of your sites across the world. So I'm just going to log in with my credentials. And again, these credentials are going to be dependent on who you give access to. So again, right now, I'm loading a record within the database, within Spectrus Portal. And you'll notice that as the data gets populated, we have your chromatographic information and biotransformation map that's going to be loaded. As I mentioned, the server is somewhere across the Atlantic, so it might be some delays. But what you see on the screen is that on the left-hand side, we have our navigation pane, or your navigation pane, as well as your searching fields. So these are your searching fields. Again, that can be configured to whatever fields that you'd like. We have a drawing app where you can draw in your structures. Or if you wanted to, you can simply add in a smiles notation. You can copy and paste or load in a file. As I mentioned before, you can simply draw in as well. And you have different criteria that you can search by. So you can search by substructure, exact structure, or a similarity factor as well. You navigate your data through this navigation pane. And here we have our biotransformation map. So if I simply click on a structure, the corresponding metadata will be displayed, as well as your analytical data. So you have your chromatographic information and your spectra. But the spectra are also quite interactive. So as I scroll through, you'll notice that I have the mass changes at the bottom to where I'm focusing on. I can zoom in on certain regions. I have my MS2 down here, as well as my MS3 information. And again, I can zoom in on certain regions of the mass spectrum as well. If I choose to, I can look at other views. Again, this is the same information that's displayed within SpectrusDB for the MetaSense results. I have my biotransformation map again, but instead I have my stability and kinetic plot along with my summary table. So if I choose to, I can just simply click on a particular metabolite and see its kinetic profile. The table itself can also be sorted, whether it's descending or ascending. So again, it is fully interactive, and as I mentioned before, more importantly, the biotransformation map is fully interactive, and the plots as well. We have another view, which is the summary view, and again, this is just an overall view of the results. You have your stability kinetic plot, you have your biotransformation map, you have your chromatographic information as well. So again, all this information is the same information that you would see in the MetaSense expert results view within SpectrusDB, but here you're viewing it as a fairly nimble client, web client within the web interface. So in summary, we believe that MetaSense really does provide live connected data that can be leveraged for future use. So you'll be able to search your results quite easily. It delivers a solution where reporting can be streamlined. Again, if you're still going to be reporting in the conventional and traditional way, MetaSense can provide a very streamlined way of reporting that information, where you have your biotransformation map that gets automatically generated, summary table, and more importantly, all your analytical data gets associated to each of the structures, and this information can be generated on a click of a button. The report can be shared through conventional means, as I mentioned, whether it's a PDF document, Word document, Excel file. You have other alternatives If you have Spectrus Processor already deployed in your organization, you can simply access the results through Spectrus Processor. And from Spectrus Processor, you can perform searches, whether they're metadata searches, structure searches, or unique to Spectrus Processor, you can perform spectral searches. Or if you want to have more of a lighter footprint in terms of IT, we have Spectrus Portal, which is our web client that can be deployed fairly seamlessly. It's fairly nimble and light, and it is web browser independent. So it can be leveraged for those organizations that don't have a Spectrus Processor already deployed. And we also believe that being able to share this information throughout the organization really does enable collaboration within groups. So whether they're your synthetic medicinal chemists communicating with your MetID or DMPK groups, or even if it's a sponsored company speaking to a CRO. I think we believe that MetaSense really does provide a end-to-end solution for data processing, but also for sharing of the results. And with that, that is the end of this webinar.
Thanks for the presentation, Richard. As I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available to anyone who logged in partway through. If you have any further questions, you can reach us at MetaSense, M-E-T-A-S-E-N-S-E, at ACDLabs.com. We do have a couple of questions for Richard. The first is, can you customize the report template?
The report template can be customized to a certain extent. So there are common elements that you, as a MetID expert or a DMPK group, may want to report out, such as the biotransformation map, spectra, and tables. The type of metadata that gets reported can be templated. The way things are arranged can be templated as well. So the look and feel can be customized.
Great, thank you. Another one just came in. If you already have Spectrus Processor and then you acquire MetaSense, is there anything else that's needed to connect to the database?
Everything is pretty straightforward. So if you already have Spectrus Processor deployed within your organization and you're using MetaSense already, the only thing that's required is the Spectrus DB Enterprise server, as well as an Oracle DB server from your IT department, so that you can communicate your results that are generated through MetaSense to the rest of the organization. So it's a fairly easy deployment to do, so it's not very laborious at all.
We do have a couple other questions, and we will be in touch with you after the webinar. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach us at metasense@acdlabs.com. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope to hear from you soon.